joining us right now. I don't say this with dread. Here's a guy I haven't talked to in a while from The Athletic, and I already did the whole subscription thing in the last segment. Get one if you don't have one. Get off your wallet. Geez, support journalism. Come on, what's wrong with you? It's the one and the only Samuel Amick. Good morning, Sam. Oh, do we have Sam up? We do? Hold on. Sam?
Put it back on hold real quick. I'll put it up.
Oh, wow. Sam's too good to talk.
Try now.
Nope.
Oh, there you are. Hi, buddy.
You there?
Hi.
Hey, man.
You hit the wrong button, Dave. Don't blame Sam.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Good job, Dave.
Well, listen, I hear you doing all these important podcasts and national things. And so I just want you, when you come home to Sacramento, I just want you to remember how lucky you are and how blessed you are to be working with professionals most of the day.
Happy to be with you. What's up, my friend?
Long time no speak. How you been? How was your week?
Busy. Getting ready. Tomorrow morning is the big day. Heading out to Orlando. So
yeah,
a lot of packing, a lot of soaking up family time, all that good stuff while trying to work. But no, doing good.
Do you have Venmo?
I do. Yeah, you can send me some money.
Because I know you didn't. I haven't even talked to you about this. I know you didn't download Destiny. So
download what?
The game Destiny that I talked to you about last week.
I did not. No, sorry.
I know you did. I know you didn't. Yeah. I know you well enough. I'm saying,
man, I wish I had. Okay,
I will pay for it.
Oh,
wow!
Download it. I want to play Destiny with you while you're in Orlando. I'm telling you how bored you're going to be. I'm being a friend to you.
Which is very kind of you. The part where I'm torn is, it's funny, my sister had made this comment the other day because I think I told you I'm borrowing the nephew's PS4.
Mm-hmm.
And so my sister was just like, yeah, God forbid you get in there. And I'm dramatizing the way she presented it, but this is how it hit me. It was, God forbid you get in there as a writer and do your best work in like the most secluded environment that you've ever been a part of. Maybe work on a book, maybe really lean into your creative juices, or just game.
Right.
or just play video games. So,
okay.
But yeah, we'll make that happen for sure.
Scale of 1 to 10, how pissed is everybody if you and I spend this whole conversation talking about video games and your trip to Orlando? Like 9? 11?
Yeah, it's pretty high. Let's go.
Let's
so
you and Shams had your article come out about 20 minutes ago, give or take. On The Athletic, laying out a lot of stuff. And I had said before you came on, Sam, normally I don't like to word for word a lot of things because, hey, pay for it. But in this case, this is all gonna be national news here. So I don't know what the biggest takeaway is, but we'll start first with the idea that the Kings are hiring an outside agency to help with this search. But really, that Joe Dumars, the idea that he will be the general manager of this team, that we can get rid of that. Joe Dumars not in the running, but will be an advisor. Do I have that right?
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Is that for you? Because you've been talking to a lot of either candidates, agents of candidates. I mean, you talk to everybody. The fact that Joe's role is not defined after the search, is that a problem or a potential problem for Sacramento?
I mean, I'm relaying perspective from people who are watching the process closely, and the answer would be yes. It's funny though, you got to lay it out this way, and I feel compelled to remind people that the tone of all of this stuff is not in any way intended to disparage Joe, who's had an incredible career as an executive, as a player, dude's a legend. But where the Kings, I think, have confused people around the NBA and possibly prospective candidates is just the lack of clarity about the model. So you would either, going into this story, the question was this: are you going to have a model like the one they proposed to Vlade that sent him packing, where Joe would be essentially the president of the front office, and then somebody like Vlade would be underneath him? You can have that model, or are you going to have one where Joe is an advisor in a Jerry West type of role with Levesque, but then the person coming in would be the head of basketball operations? That's a really key question. So, yeah, not knowing exactly what Joe's role is going to be after they make this selection does leave some people still wondering, am I working with Joe? And then I'm sure the fans have every right to sit there and say, again, I mean, Joe's got the chops to do the job, but it's not, I don't think, ideal to have, one person doing the draft, one person doing free agency, and then potentially leaving right after that. You know what I mean? So that's where people around the league were confused yesterday, because a lot of folks definitely thought that Joe just wanted this job, and that's the way it was going to go. But we are assured that this is the reality here.
Well, it is kind of confusing, Sam, and to your point, I just want to follow up on that, and I don't know what kind of read you have on that, is basically, as the story goes, is Vivek proposed to Vlade, hey, Joe would kind of come in and be the head and make the final basketball decisions. How did we go from that scenario to a scenario where after this, Joe will not be in that same position? That just seems awkward to me to go from one extreme to the other so fast.
Jay, I'm with you, and I mean, to speak plainly, it's like, first of all, and I probably should have written this, like, I wouldn't blame Joe at all for being confused or frustrated here, himself. And I'm not saying he is, but hypothetically, like, wait, this very structure is, like, to your point, Jay, this is the thing you presented, and then Vlade wasn't rocking with it, and so he left. But why would that change, like, the premise and the initial decision on Vivek's part was that he was comfortable with Joe heading up basketball operations. The part that that only Vivek can answer to is, I mean, for one, I think there's a concern and a fear. They don't want a bunch of high-level candidates to not be interested because Joe, if he was going to be the head of basketball. And so I think partly there's some rewriting of the story now in order to get the best people in. And I'm not saying what we wrote isn't true, but I think they have, rethought it a bit. And I also, I mean, listen, I don't have a psych degree, so I'm not trying to go too far down this road. But I don't know. I have questions regarding the way the Vlade situation was handled. And now, there's part of me that just says, if you didn't want him there, just fire him.
You mean like
and I feel like, yes.
Yeah. Okay.
And I just feel like, there was, I have a hard time thinking that Vivek didn't know the answer, Vlade's answer to the proposal. I think he probably knew how that conversation was going to go, which begs the question, why take that approach? Especially because now you potentially put Joe in a spot where, he's got every reason to think he's going to head up basketball ops. And then now you're kind of having to hit the rewind button.
Do you maybe take that approach with Vlade, hoping he'll resign, and when he resigns, that frees up his cash?
Yeah, I mean, unless it's changed in the last few days, I was not, I was told that it would not free up his cash, that he was still getting paid out.
No, I know that, but I'm saying if Vlade had resigned of his own volition and walked away from his contract, I'm wondering if it was one of those resign or get fired type of things.
Yeah, no, maybe. And I want to be a little careful to not speculate too much. But yeah, it's weird. I think there are people who get frustrated by Vivek who say that just personality wise, he's non-confrontational. He's not necessarily comfortable. He's comfortable having the final say, but the execution of certain decisions like this one sometimes happen in a roundabout sort of way when maybe they should be direct. So within all of that, it's weird. Like, the story was partly about people around the NBA confused about Joe Dumars and his role with the Kings. I think it very well could have been about, is Joe Dumars confused with good reason about, how this is going to unfold. Sam
Amick of The Athletic with us. Let's get into that. Not the Joe Dumars part, but I do want to get into the Vivek and ownership dynamic, because you did in your article. When you talk about, first off, you spoke about Scott Perry perhaps being one of the leaders, if not the favorite, who knows, but the minority owners, certain ones you spoke to, seem to be rallying around him a bit. And we've long talked about, and it's kind of been an undercurrent about the sometimes frictiony relationship between Vivek and his faction of ownership and some of the other minority owners. Do you sense, and obviously if you don't know, great, but do you sense a different sense of urgency here? Do you sense a little bit more pressure here? And thirdly, Sam, I'm asking you a lot, but you mentioned that Vivek will have the final say in who hires the GM. Is that an outlier? Is that fairly normal in NBA circles with teams that the owner will have that type of final say, or is Vivek different than most of the owners in that capacity?
No, that part's not different.
Okay.
Yeah, I do think that, and because I live here, I'm focused on the Kings more than a lot of other teams. I think Kings fans, sometimes for all the sleepless nights they've had, many of which you've caused with your on-point analysis of the team,
Sorry.
like, I think it would probably make them feel a little better if they took a step back, talked to a few other fan bases, and realized that owners across the league are, the title itself says it all. I mean, the buck stops with them. And so, no, him picking the GM is not an outlier at all. These dynamics exist to varying degrees with almost every single team. You know what I mean? Even really, really functional ones. And I think you and I have talked about this before too, even Vivek's old team with the Warriors, it doesn't really get covered as much, especially during good times. But, Joe Lacob is a bear to work with. He's been incredibly successful. But, I guess I'll stop there. But you talk to some other people, there's, those elements exist everywhere. So no, I don't think it doesn't jump out to me that Vivek has the final say.
Sam, obviously the search for the head of basketball ops is what we're focused on right now, but one of the criticisms of the Kings over the last several years has been just the overall lack of personnel within the front office. Do you get the sense that not just finding, the head of basketball ops would be very important, but do you have any read if they're kind of embracing that idea that they need to just add more bodies, more personnel, more cooks to that front office kitchen, so to speak?
I think, Jay, that is going to all sprout from the initial pick. Because no, I don't have any sense of some, just hiring spree, especially in these economic times and all the losses that they've taken and the cash calls / loan discussions happening with owners. That stuff doesn't lend itself to the blank check mentality, which you kind of need to build out that sort of a staff. Steve Ballmer and the Clippers are probably the best example of that right now, where they just kept adding and adding. I mean, if anybody's not aware, it's, you got Jerry West, who's a very expensive advisor to Steve Ballmer. You got Lawrence Frank, who's not cheap himself, heading up the front office. Michael Winger is the GM. He could run any team in the league. And then you have two of the guys that I mentioned in the story who are very good, Mark Hughes and Trent Redden. That's, I don't know the final number, but that's an incredibly expensive front office. And I don't see the Kings doing that, at least right now. I think they have to nail this pick. But then the reason, I think we should probably spend a little time talking about Scott Perry, because the reason that he has so many people's attention is because he, listen, you guys know me well enough. Like, I don't advocate for certain. I might write a column saying this guy would be a good fit or whatever, but this is not advocacy. This is reading the room and looking at the dynamics. He's got 7 years of history in the front office with Joe, who, it kind of solves the Joe dynamic, where Scott would definitely want to be the top basketball executive, but the comfort level with Joe, I think, matters. The minority owner thing we mentioned earlier. More importantly for the fans, what I found interesting is, Dave, tell me if you disagree. I'm not sure De'Aaron Fox is here if not for Scott Perry, because they couldn't get a workout with anybody at that time, and then De'Aaron in particular, there had to be some kind of cajoling, and that was that time where that's the value that Scott brought. So he makes sense in a lot of different ways, but then the more we talk about him, there's definitely people who think that that's just going to guarantee that Vivek doesn't do it because he's tired of hearing about the guy.
Well, and the other thing, too, with Scott, it is a mixed bag because he never had full control necessarily here, but he also had, as one of our Kings Herald buddies just pointed out on Twitter, $105 million on 3 average to below average power forwards last year in New York. There is a question, to me at least, as to how good is Scott Perry. His relationships are phenomenal. And I want to go back, because I want to get into that. I want to go back to, because I threw a lot of stuff at you. I want to now stand in front of ownership a little bit, because I do think this is important, even though Kings fans probably don't want to hear it. But Hey, they didn't have to fire Vlade. There's really no way for fans to show their displeasure. This would have been a freebie year for them because there's probably not going to be games in person. You just had social media. They fire Vlade. They eat that money. I assume they eat the money with Page as well, but I don't know. They're going to go out and get a GM, some other hires, and as Jay just asked you, there's a lot of money associated with that. So, and if my notes are correct, and I don't know, Sam, if you got the same thing, but I think it was last Saturday was the deadline. You mentioned cash calls and loans. It was originally a cash call. I believe it turned into a loan to loan to the Kings from the owners, and I believe that deadline was August 15th. So you have a lot of owners that have just recently written checks to the franchise because the Kings, like a lot of other teams, if not all, are hemorrhaging money right now. So they've shown the plus side of, hey, we're going to spend money that we don't really have to do this the right way. But I again want to ask you, because I threw 50 things at you. What if any, because you mentioned in your article that minority owners were rallying around Scott Perry perhaps, is that friction level more or less the same than what you normally hear? Because I think this is an interesting time right now for this decision. I
don't know that I have a fantastic pulse there. Okay. I mean, yeah, because I'm inclined to say that it's a little better than it has been. Mm-hmm. But that, the second I say that, I want to pull it back in. You know what I mean? The dynamics still exist. You still have people who are trying to, or at least open to selling shares. You have, honestly, I mean, there continues to be a lot of questions about their overall structure, and what it might look like down the road. I mean, there's people who want the Kings to succeed who wish, I don't know that Vivek has this capability, but they kind of wish that, all right, since you have this level of influence, at some point, why don't you buy up some of these shares from the other folks and kind of get rid of that element that makes it hard for them to function, where there's resentment because of the relatively small amount of the team that he actually owns, and how that kind of empowers the minority owners, because yes, they know that he's the principal governor, but cash or money talks, right? And so ever since he bought the team, nobody can get over the relatively small investment that led to it, and how wide the gap is between that and the enormous amount of influence that he has. So that's a lot of gobbledygook with some substance in there. But I think that, that element is always a moving target between Vivek and the minority owners. And in the way that I wrote it is that, it's kind of a rare opportunity where some of them feel like that would go a long ways towards synergy if their voice was heard on this hire.
Well, and just to further what you're saying too, there has been that friction in factions, and not to play too much inside baseball, but I think this is relevant, is you've got, and won't mention any names, but you've got minority owners that are trying to get out for a while. The problem is the problem, at least according to some of them, is that on one side, if ownership's going to buy up those shares, they want to they're valuing it not at $1.5 or $2 billion. So these minority owners are going to take a massive loss, or at least not realize that profit, if they in fact sell internally rather than externally. You have all these inside politics. You have some minority owners that want to jump ship. You have some feeling that they've been marginalized. And by the way, there's an argument that they should be, and that there should be one big dog. And this isn't a Bash Vivek session. This is just the politics that are happening internally. So in that case, I'm just trying to back your point up, not that it needs it, that making some peace with the minority owners and having some sort of unanimity amongst everybody,
or unity. One of the two.
Thank you. Is not going to go a long way. Now that now that Vlade is gone, I mean, we can. There's a lot of other things too. Again, well, go ahead.
And it's not like unity for the sake of unity. It just so happens to be a guy that. I mean, I know for a fact that. So when Scott left, there was certainly frustration from the Kings. It was only 3 months. And then he was bouncing. In the end, however, first of all, they got compensated pretty well, a second-round pick and $1 million. They also, over time, definitely maintained a relationship. I don't know the frequency, but I was certainly told that Vivek he's just the kind of person who he kind of has a rap for routinely calling executives of other teams and people from other places to ask questions about his team, which some of the people who have worked for him get frustrated by because it's like, well, but that's something he does. I think Scott has played that role occasionally. So it's not like, I don't want this to get framed the wrong way. It's not like, headline minority owners pushing Vivek to do this or that. I mean, this is a guy that he's been on record as being a huge fan of, and I think still is. But the other thing is, there's a lot of names in this search. Yeah. And to the point where we didn't, even in our story, we kind of reached a point like we're not going to just throw out every single name we have because, first of all, they didn't reflect the same thing. Some of them were like really high level head of basketball operations type candidates, and then others were like head of an analytics group somewhere else where it would really surprise somebody if they were a true candidate. And I think that candidate list, that is kind of making the rounds around the league reflects the confusion, to go full circle here, the confusion about what structure they want. And we're hearing these themes. I mean, even on the, hopefully this, you can see the through line here, guys, but even on the ownership front, Dave, your point about minority owners and maybe, they should be kind of put in check. Like, that's all about having defined roles, right? That requires communication coming in when everybody understands that the way this works in the NBA is you do have one principal voice, no matter how much money he spent. And minority owners all over the NBA are getting marginalized. It's like, it's part of the job. That's what that is. So communication, though, is the one thing that across all those different spectrums, I think that's where they fall short.
Last thing for you, we're totally out of time, but I promised I'd ask you about this. I've been saying I don't see Mike Zarin as a possibility. I was on the phone with you yesterday, just pulling back the curtain, that his bio says he's a lifelong Celtics fan. I always say he sounds like me if I had talent and intelligence, that he wears a Celtics jersey and sits in the rafters to this day, and that's how he takes in games with his season tickets. He is a Boston Celtics guy, so it doesn't sound like a guy who would want to leave Boston for Sacramento. And without speculating, I'm not asking you to say you've talked to Mike Zarin, but do you disagree with that Mike Zarin could be a legit candidate?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, Mike is somebody who's been doing the Boston thing his entire life. Mm-hmm. It's a cool story. He was a season ticket holder and a fan with his father, and even when he was Danny Ainge's right-hand man, Mike would sit up in the second deck with his dad and watch Celtics games, which is pretty cool. So that part of his story, though, I think, given the right opportunity, he'd be very excited about another challenge and another phase here. But again, it goes back to got to be the head of basketball. Like, he interviewed with Philly years ago. He was part of, I think that was the search that led to Sam Hinkie. Mm-hmm. And like, I know for a fact that at that time there was some consternation about head of basketball, not head of basketball. Yeah. So it goes back to the Dumars stuff. Like, Mike Zarin's not coming if he's working for Joe Dumars. I don't think. Right. Listen, I have zero intel right now.
I hear the same thing, Sam. Same thing.
Yeah, I know him pretty well. Yep. I enjoy him. It's funny. I'm overthinking this, but he gave me a really fascinating interview last year, talking about the trade deadline and how his job worked. And I always wonder, every so often, people, I think, grant me interviews, maybe at least partly because they know, like, if they have an interest in anything Sacramento, they kind of, they're not mad if their voice gets heard in this market, if that makes sense.
Right.
So I remember that thought crossing my mind at the time, like, was he really just being helpful with me, or was there any kind of side, motive there? Who knows? Okay. But talented dude. But it goes back to the Dumars thing. People just want clarity on how it's structured. And I'm not even saying that one structure is better than the other. Joe Dumars could run this team. If the rec decides to have Joe Dumars run the team, you will not see a column with me killing that move. They just got to tell people what they're doing.
The next time we talk to Sam Amick, he will be either at or near the bubble in Orlando as he says goodbye to the fam. And remember, the people that you read, not feeling sorry for them, not playing a violin, but they're real people with real families. And we appreciate all the effort. You can go to theathletic.com. check it out. There's free trials. There's all kinds of stuff. It's the best sports journalism you're going to find anywhere, and Sam does a fantastic job both nationally and locally. He's going to get off the phone. He's going to download Destiny. We're going to play online. And, give my love to the family. And, I know you got your neighbor there, but, we're around while you're gone, right? If anyone
Thanks,
needs
buddy.
anything. Okay?
I appreciate you.
All right, dude. Thank you. Take care, brother.
All right. Be good. Thanks, guys.
It's the Carmichael Dave Show on Sports 1140 KHTK.